All right, welcome back to HomeStudioCorner.com. In a previous video, I talked about bounce to disk, and now I want to talk about record to disk, which is another option for getting your mixes bounced or exported out of Pro Tools. Now, this is not a Pro Tools specific video. The previous one I showed you specifically how to bounce in Pro Tools, but the concept of today's video can apply to any of the DAW platforms out there, from Logic, Cubase, any of those guys. Now, in the last video, I showed you how to bounce to disk. Now, a couple things that I don't like about bounce to disk is, for one, when you use it, you don't have any metering and you can't control the volume levels while it bounces. So say you're doing a quick bounce, but you may need to adjust the vocal while it's bouncing. Can't do that with bounce to disk. I'll show you real quick. We'll say okay, we'll just name it test, and you'll lose my vocal for a second, but watch when I hit save. Watch how the meters here on the left-hand side don't move, and obviously I can't adjust any of the volumes as well. So it's a completely static bounce. I can't make any adjustments. And that's fine if everything is set perfectly, but if you want to do changes, then you need to come up with another way. And that's why I usually, when I'm doing a mix, I use record to disk. And it's just a fancy way of saying record everything down to a new stereo track. So here's what that looks like in practice. Instead of routing all my audio tracks out to the main output here, I'll change and route them to a bus, which I call submix. Now this submix feeds this auxiliary track here, which is where I do all my processing on the entire mix. Now, while I'm just playing and working on my mix, everything feeds through this submix auxiliary track out to the main outputs, the master output here, and I can bounce right off of that. But when I'm ready to do a mix and say I want to have a little more control, all I have to do is, first of all, create a new stereo audio track, and you can see that's here. And all I have to do is, instead of routing this out to the main outputs, I can route it to this track. So we'll route this to, actually name this bus bounce, because it helps me keep things straight. Set the input of this track to that bounce bus, and set the output of this track to the main output, left and right. So this is our main interface outputs. Now, as you can see, these audio tracks are playing through the submix bus, coming through my submix track, and out of that submix track through the bounce bus onto this audio track. And this audio track is the only thing that we're listening to now, instead of the submix. So everything is coming all the way through to this audio track here. Makes better sense to put it there. Now, if we put this into record and we hit play, now you can hear all the audio is still sounds the same, but now it's coming through this audio track. And if I hit record, I can now record this audio. So let's say there was a little mistake in the volume there, and I wanted to come back and make some adjustments. I can do that. I can come back and just start recording right here, and then come in and adjust the volume. You can't do that with a bounce. So if you're doing a live mix, and by live I mean you're making adjustments on the fly as it goes, maybe you're in a time crunch and you've got to make some adjustments and you've got to get this done, that's the way to do it. Now, you may wonder, why use this auxiliary track here? Why not just route all the audio channels to that bounce bus, to this audio track? You can do that, but throughout the course of a mix, you may have acoustic guitars are routed to an acoustic guitar bus, drums are routed to a drum bus, so those actual audio tracks are already routed somewhere. The easiest way to get around that, you'll have to spend 5-10 minutes just going and sending each output to the right place. If you get in the habit of running everything through a single aux track like this, then as you go through your entire mix and the process from tracking to mixing, everything will be coming through this aux track. Then all you have to do when you're ready to bounce is change this from your main outputs over to the bounce bus, and bam, you're done. Now you may wonder, okay, so I've got this entire bounce done. Now what? How do I get in here and get this out of Pro Tools? And that's actually rather easy. You come in, and let's say this is the selected audio here. You select that and come over to your regions window here. And I'll zoom in there. As you can see, the region I have selected is highlighted here. And you simply click on this menu and let's see, go to Export Regions as Files. And you'll get a window that's very similar to the bounce window. It lets you do all the same things: bit depth, sample rate, select where you want to put it, and do stereo as opposed to multiple mono. All the same things we covered in the bounce video, but now it just exports it offline. As you can see, it was that quick. Now there's an audio file sitting in that folder. That's the exact same thing as this. The other cool thing is, you may remember when we did bounce to disk, we have to put a dither plugin on the master fader. Doing record to disk, it obviously recorded through with no dither, which is what you want. And then when it exports, Pro Tools actually manually adds dither if you're changing the bit rate or the bit depth. So I changed the bit depth from, this session is 24-bit, we're bouncing down to 16. Pro Tools automatically added that dither when it did that export. So that's another cool thing. You can't select which dither you want, but it adds that dither for you. Now, sound quality-wise, is bounce to disk better than record to disk? There have been shootouts and null tests and all that stuff. I don't think there is any difference. It's mainly, to me, it's just the workflow. I like to be able to change my volumes throughout the course of a mix, especially if I'm doing rough mixes and I just need to ride the vocal throughout that bounce so it doesn't sound too loud in certain parts or too quiet in other parts. So that's why I use record to disk. If you have any questions on that, probably could have explained it better. So please leave a comment on the blog, homestudiocorner.com, and I'll be happy to answer that. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you around here soon.